What is going on, everybody? Happy Saturday. Bobby Fye, Eric Sheetshaber, and Brandon Cruz. We're going to be talking through this two-game NFL slate. You guys might be playing the showdown. I'm not actually playing the showdown, but I am playing the slate, and I'm playing it on both sites. And I'm curious to sort of hear what you guys think. So, any overall thoughts you want to get into, Sheets, before we get into it?
Well, I mean, without specifically getting into it, no. But I think that to me, one thing that's particularly relevant is what you plan on doing with the Rashad Bateman news, because I don't think news has come out yet, but I can't imagine him playing. For some reason, he's still, as of like, interrupt me if I'm wrong, but as of like right now, he's still listed as questionable. And I don't think we get that news until significantly after the first game starts. So I was wondering if you are going to model for Bateman being out, and if so, how you're doing that. And second of all, so that might be my first question. And then my second just overall question would be, well, it's not even overall, is what would you think of like someone like Hollywood Brown today at 3K? And I mention it only because you don't need any value today. Everything's like so super soft that you don't have to play it. But if you did play it cheapo and leave money on the table and get away with it, you could be a hero. So those are the things I'm thinking about as we start talking about this stuff.
Yeah, as of right now, I would not change anything about Rashad Bateman. I have no reason to think he's going to miss the game. I mean, he was a limited participant at practice. They need to win. I am under sort of the opposite impression. I would be very surprised if he was out. It's a foot thing, but it is a big piece of. I mean, I'm not like 100% or anything, but if I had to lean, I would lean like maybe closer to 70 that he plays, maybe a little bit higher. But that's just based on the fact that he did practice in limited fashion, and this is basically the game of the season for them. So I would imagine they'll do everything they can to get him. They also got rid of Deontay Johnson. So that's sort of a big thing. I don't really – I guess it would make Aguilar another maybe 3K. But what you mentioned about Marquise Brown, I actually think Marquise Brown is a terrific play. And I think that one thing you could do – this is a slate you can totally leave money on the table. There's plenty of reasons to, as you mentioned, you don't need the savings. But you could play Brown instead of Worthy or Hopkins and just leave that extra 2K or 220, 300 on the table. I think that's completely viable today if you wanted to go that route. So that was what I think. I think that it does make some sense to just take some shots with Brown. And if the Chiefs sort of have their way today, they kind of want to get him involved and get him one. He's close with Lamar. He's close with the team. He was a big acquisition, but they just haven't had a chance to really use him yet. So I mean, if this game was played in 2 weeks, he might be the one who's the most expensive receiver of Kansas City, and we might want to get ahead on that just at the 3K play. That's my take. What do you think, Brandon, about all this stuff?
So with the Bateman at 49, I'm still building stuff. I have no reason to be building at the moment as if he was not playing. I mean, the fact that we don't have Johnson or Aguilar indicates to me, or I would assume that Henry and then the two tight ends from Baltimore would be the people that are used. And so personally, I'm not changing stuff. I don't think I'm going to get to Bateman in my stuff at the moment. I'm probably going to prioritize Andrews and Henry from this game and Lamar. I'm not really honestly, the Bateman news doesn't really like change one way or the other. I'm most likely playing Andrews today. The Brown news, though, because like when I look at this slate, with how expensive Henry and Jackson is, and I know there's outs or situations to where these guys can underperform, but the fact that we can have a guy who's $3,000, who I would project like straight up for 5 points, I think you play him with Jackson, and then you just play. You pay up for Henry, you pay up for Jackson, and it really cancels it out. Like this situation where like kind of like an NBA or anything else. Do you take 2 6K guys, or do you just pay the $12,000 for Jokic or whatever? This is one where I would just play, or because we have a $3,000 player that I think is going to get at least 4 points, 5 points. I think you automatically have to play Jackson just because he has the most upside. Like that's my at least take on this slate. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with the Baltimore side, if I want to stack that game or what else I want to do. But in regards to Bateman and the Hollywood Brown question, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I just, again, it might be a situation where we barely see Brown, but I don't think so. I just have a feeling, and I also feel like this could be a little bit of an FU game for the Chiefs if they can get something rolling. Like that people have been talking about their offense, and they haven't done much this season in Lamar. I mean, sorry, and they might be they're the phoniest, 13-1 team of all time, and all this stuff. I could see this game potentially getting interesting for the Chiefs side. So I do agree that playing Lamar should be in like half your lineups at least. That's my take. I just think this ceiling is so much higher. But I think that if you're going to go another route, it's Mahomes. I think Stroud is what you'll get from builders, but it's cold there. Mahomes is used to this. And I feel like that FU game is coming. Now, Houston's defense has been very solid, so maybe this is not the right time. I could see, though, that Mahomes, Kelsey, Brown, maybe throw in for one of Hopkins or Worthy as being the stack to go for. So that's my, other than the fairly chalky builds of the Baltimore, but even that gives us some opportunity to do some different things. So thought it'd be interesting to talk about the positions, just to go through where we're at on each of the quarterbacks. As I mentioned, I'll start this one off, but I have 50% Lamar, but I'm honestly, he's probably in 70% of my buy-ins. And Mahomes is number 2. I've got him at 30%, I've got him at 25%, excuse me. But again, probably a little bit more. And then my larger field stuff, I'm getting to a little bit of Russell Wilson and a little bit of Stroud, but mostly focusing on Lamar and Mahomes today. How about you, Sheets? What are you getting to? I think Stroud is probably going to be the one you're going to go with, right?
Well, I'm just started rebuilding now, but just talking macro and talking football and whatever it is, I don't get the need to play Mahomes. So here's my logic. Okay? Everybody's been waiting for this FU game. The fact is, he's had no games this whole season, pretty much. Okay, where you like, oh, this is a Mahomes ceiling game. Second of all, he like limped off the freaking field. Okay, they were worried they wouldn't even play. Okay, so he's so I would imagine that whatever rushing upside he had is gone. All right, and it's a tiny total, right? It's a 42-point total, and I just think that it's going to be just like Kansas City's done all year. They're just going to try to ground it, just try to pound the rock. And I rate that game to be pretty low scoring, especially from the Kansas City side. I would prefer the Houston side if in DFS if they showed me any flashes of upside, which they have not.
They've done far less than Mahomes has done, by the way.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I think that whole game like rates to bust. So I'm kind of with you with wanting to just play as much of Lamar as I can. From the Kansas City game, I do think that I'll end up getting probably more Stroud. Yeah, that's my overall take. I would prefer to not get to the Mahomes. That would be my take on that.
Yeah, I'm interested just because everything we say about Mahomes is true times 10 for Stroud. Not to mention Stroud has been playing indoors most of the season and still hasn't gotten there at all. I had one game against Jacksonville where he put up 26. Lamar, Mahomes at least put up a couple 28, 26s, 25s, whatever. It's really hard to see them outscoring Lamar Jackson, to Brandon's point of just maybe
right.
Like you could make a serious case to lock in Lamar Jackson and just roll from there.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get different with that play, but I do think it makes sense. And there are different guys to stack him with, which we'll get into in a minute. But talking about let's move over to running back then. If that is sort of a ground and pound game, Sheets, are you finding that you're getting? I mean, I'm guessing that we're all going to be getting a lot of Mixon today, along with Henry. Are you getting too much of the Pacheco? Are you getting too much of the Kareem Hunt? Any of the Kareem Hunt as a long shot play? Anything like that?
I don't think that Hunt is the idea, just because of game script. I think that Kansas City being the moderate favorite, it's more likely, and I think they prefer, like I said, I think they prefer to just let Pacheco run it if he can,
Right.
And so I actually prefer. I like Pacheco. I think the best of all the 4 running backs. I mean, Henry obviously makes a lot of sense, but hey, Henry was a 15-point favorite last week against the Giants and got like 2 fantasy points.
Yeah, all Lamar.
Yep. So I think like which fundamentally, I do prefer Pacheco, but we're gonna see. So I'm just starting to build right now where I actually get.
Yeah, I'll just throw out I actually agree with that too, but it is interesting. Like Pacheco's going to be 25% owned, whatever, maybe a little more. Hunt is supposed to be about 5% owned. It is worth noting that they got the same amount of touches last week. And you're right, the game script you'd want Kareem Hunt maybe as a guy if you're trailing, I guess. But I tend to think that they're going to lean back towards Pacheco, especially as we get nearer to the playoffs. But I just wanted to point that out that Hunt at 150 ownership might be an interesting pivot just because of the if they do get similar touches and you just get the right touchdown variance, Hunt could be every bit as good as Pacheco. So that was my thoughts there. What are you getting at running back, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean when I look at this slate and I look at the running backs, I'm very concerned about everybody at the bottom or even like the mid tier and down. Like as stated, like Henry and Mixon can bust at any time, but the fact that Harris is really like doing nothing, the fact that I would probably prefer Jalen Warren over Harris, and I don't really prefer him. I don't really want to go to Hunt. I think there's a real chance that Justice Hill, just on receiving alone, could score like 8 to 9 points and end up outscoring Harris, Warren, and Hunt. I would just prioritize Henry and Mixon, like flat out here. Like I think the likelihood that even if they don't bust, the likelihood that Henry and Mixon are outscoring the rest of the running backs is pretty high. So those are the two guys that I would prioritize. I similar to what Sheet said about what Pacheco's been doing, or Kansas City rather. I am not a fan of Hunt or Pacheco, and I'm not a fan of running 3 running backs on the slate either. I think you just lock in Jackson, Henry, Mixon, regardless if it's a big contest, small contest. Like you're probably going to be scoring pretty well just based on those 3 guys alone. And the fact that salary isn't a concern past that, yet again, I'm going Brown, so like I'm not even worried about like what my average salary is past that. Like I think those are the 4 guys that I would be locking in today, even if I was playing a lot of lineups, because I think you can have a high likelihood of at least hitting on 3 of those guys being optimal.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I have a little bit more love for Jalen Warren. I think that the game script should fit him, especially if you play the Baltimore's from ahead, the pass catching back from coming from behind. The problem with all these running backs, and partly why I agree with it, I don't like the 3 running back builds today for a lot of reasons, but one of them is these are all really good run defenses. Every team playing today has a really good run defense. So I don't really want to mess with like the best run defenses in football outside of like, they're probably like 4 of the best 6 or 7 in all of football. So I don't want to mess with that. And like you said, maybe you just take the sure upside or winning the position with the Mixon Henry. I also think that Justice Hill is a really interesting guy to get different with. If you take sort of the flip script, he can get a big 3rd down play. He's going to be on the field no matter what. He can get their pass catching. Obviously, on DraftKings is more appealing than FanDuel because of that. So I like the idea of getting to a little Justice Hill as a contrarian play. And to be frank, I still am going to be on the look. I'm not going to have a ton of Hunt, but I'll probably have like 5 to 10% just because if we want to play Nico Collins also in addition to those guys, which we'll get into in a minute, we might need a little bit of savings because it's hard to play Lamar. I mean, it's not hard. You can just spend all the way down and gamble. But if you lock in Lamar, the 2 top running backs, it's hard to play Nico Collins as well without getting a little bit frisky with some of your receivers. And then in that case, you're going to run into similar builds because they're going to have one of these 3K guys, most likely being of the 3K. The Calvin Austin will be the most popular at 3,800, but the 3K flat of Worthy is what I think people. I'm sorry, not of Worthy, of Marquise Brown is something that I think you're going to run into the similar builds, but that's okay because there's still not going to be that many.
Let me ask both of you guys this: outside of Mixon and Henry, like who do you like the most of everybody else? I would say Justice Hill.
I like the Justice Hill idea,
and then Warren for me. Those would be the 2.
Warren, then Hill for me, but I'll still be more over the field on Warren. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, over the field on Hill. Warren, I don't know if I'm even going to make it to as high ownership as he has. I just think that like he's probably going to end up in like the 20 to 25% range, which is probably right around where Justice Hill ends up for me in that somewhere in that same range, 20, 25. What do you think about those sheets?
I just made my first thing, took my first shot at this. After Mixon and Henry, I actually have Najee Harris next, followed by Justice Hill.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, when the team has played, I believe that Warren and Harris were both had decent-ish games. Yeah, against Baltimore last time, they both were double digits, just for what it's worth. All right, let's talk about wide receiver. Sheets, what are you getting to at wide receiver today?
I'm not like that overweight on whatchamacallit. I don't think so of anybody right now. My first thing. No, actually, yeah, I have a ton of Nico Collins. That's my him and Mixon actually are my two, at least right now, highest owned overall on the slate. Then after that, Zay Flowers would be my next guy, followed by Tank Dell.
Yeah, I think that's going to be what a lot of us are probably going to be finding today, right? I think that seems like makes a lot of sense. Where did you end up with Calvin Austin?
Like market weight, like 30%, something like that.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that there are pivots, and I just wanted to, I want to at least consider the Calvin Austin pivots, especially like just even within the Pittsburgh team alone. Like they're going to have to air it out at some point, and that's the way to beat Baltimore. And Calvin Austin, Mike Williams, Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, they're all going to get looks. I think we can maybe take a gamble on a guy like Mike Williams as maybe a pivot, but I tend to agree that that's sort of where I'm at as well right now, although I do have a little bit overweight some of these cheaper ones. How about you, Brandon?
Yeah, for me, I mean, outside of Brown, since I've just yapped about him this whole time, it's probably going to be Dell, and then Flowers as the two guys that I'd probably target. I'm really hesitant on Pittsburgh, and if anything, I would probably be more interested in somebody like Jefferson or even Williams versus Austin, because I feel like Austin's going to probably end up pushing over like 45 to 50% in single entry contests. And I just feel like with how, I mean, Calvin Austin hasn't been bad at all, but I feel like I would just want to be different and take Mike Williams straight up at like no ownership.
And no ownership, and all it takes is one play for a guy like that.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I think we're, speaking very similarly of like everything kind of leads to Calvin Austin or like a $3,000 player, even if you aren't using Brown. So I feel like you'd probably want to go, or I would probably want to go Mike Williams over Austin just to have someone with no ownership in the lineup.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
We'll talk a couple of more things about this Rashad Bateman and this Hollywood Brown thing. Just to kind of throw in some just nonsense. I don't want to say nonsense, but Rashad Bateman was like, I don't know when he had limited practices, but he was walking around in a walking boot yesterday. That's one thing. Second of all, apparently there was like, I don't know whether it was on Instagram or X or whatever, but apparently, Hollywood Brown and Mahomes were going back and forth tweeting how psyched they were that he was ready to play again. So you could read into that what you want. So you could argue that it's not just he's okay to play, it's that he's like really going to play, and Mahomes is going to find him.
And not to keep, raining on Brown and stuff, but like the Kansas City's receiving has been terrible this year, like with anybody. Like I can't imagine it could be any worse having Brown involved. And if anything, I would think that would lean to him being played more, especially with them starting to make a playoff run. Or I mean, clearly, no.
Well,
but like,
he's not looking like nobody looks like they're playing him. It looks like he's 8%.
Not only that though, but the I thought you meant by playing him like the team will play him.
No, I mean, I'm like, I think the team will. I think Kansas City will play him more than other people. Yeah. Like real talk football, not like DFS. I think Hollywood Brown will be an integral role, like in their playoff run. and they need to get him like actually used. Like I think he's wide receiver 1 straight up over Hopkins, over Worthy. He's just been injured. And oh, good.
Yeah, the other thing I would add though is that the reason why I brought it up again is because you mentioned that Mike Williams. I mean, just one play gets him there. I mean, Hollywood Brown's the ultimate one play gets him here.
Mhm.
You know, he has like median projection of like 5 or whatever it is, but that's not even relevant. You know what I mean? Like, he catches a ball, it's probably going to be 15 points. You know what I mean? Like, it's,
and he's min price. Like when I see that, I'm like, yeah, there's like any risk there. Like I'll tolerate any risk there at all. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting. I like this thinking. I agree. I don't agree that he's the wide receiver 1, but I don't think that it's impossible to by playoff time that he would be. And I think that's actually an interesting way to go about that. And I'm actually bumping up my ownership. I'm definitely going to have at least 20% of it, I think, just because I think there's a path where, like, I know this sounds really nuts now, but like he ends up as one of the top 2 or 3 scoring receivers and he's 3K. I don't think that's impossible. I don't think they would let him go if he wasn't ready. And I do think they will look for him, specifically look for him. And I think there'll be design plays for him if they're even near the goal line in a way. I think it's at least worth speculating on. Maybe it's not for sure, but that's where I'm at. So I like that idea a little bit. I think it makes a lot of sense rather than playing guys who are 6 times the ownership, 7 times the ownership at 2,500 more. He could easily be the highest scoring receiver on their team. It wouldn't be that surprising to any of us.
I think game theory just shows you just play him, because especially if you want to get Nico, you want to get the expensive guys. Like typically on 2 gamers or whatever, you're trying to get the highest scoring quarterback, or you just pay down at quarterback at 52 or whatever, and he's optimal due to the fact that you need to pay up for everybody else. Like I don't get why Brown is expected to be like 8% owned. Like I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did want to mention that if we do lose, if for something does happen to Bateman, there's pretty easy 2v2 swaps if you've got like multiple things left, especially if you have the defense. You can swap over to Flowers and the Steelers D versus Bateman and let's say you have Bateman and the Ravens D or something. You could totally switch that up. But I did want to say that the guy who I think benefits the most if Bateman is out outside of Flowers is probably likely. And I think that Andrews is also a tremendous play, which we'll get into in a minute. But if there was one other one, Tylan Wallace, we saw the one huge game based on really one just huge play. And that would be something that I wouldn't mind if people did. But I think Devontae Walker is actually the guy who would show up more than Wallace. Walker, I think there's a chance that he would be the one who projects better than Tylan Wallace. I'm not sure, but that would be my speculation.
Yeah, I would think the opposite. I would think it would be Wallace actually, because he's actually shown he's had like a big game. I think
he had one play, and Walker is just coming off a game where he caught a touchdown. So look, they both have had one play all season. Walker's got a little. I don't know. I've heard a little more hype around him, just for the future, but I don't really know what to make of any of that. So either way, one of these guys, I don't think that there's going to be a natural, easy guess. I mean, Lamar, you're talking about broken plays, looking for somebody downfield. That's what you're hoping for, one big play with one of these guys, and that's pretty much it. This will not be like the Monday 2-game slate where there's going to be no quarterback scoring any points or anything. You're going to have and that even speaks to. I'm just thinking more about the Brandon blocking in of Lamar. I think that does make pretty good amount of sense, actually. I still believe that there's a chance for Mahomes even banged up, and I think maybe he's banged up less than they're acting like, but whatever. The other guys we didn't talk about much were the. I still have some interest in Worthy. They seem to be finding him on more routes, not just these go routes that he was playing early in the year. I really like Tank Dell, but again, he's going to be popular. Nothing revolutionary there. And I think this speculation, the flip side of the Bateman thing, why don't we take the other side? That's the side I'm taking. Because of all this news and question and all this stuff, I'm going to be double the field on Bateman because nobody wants to play him anymore. He was looking like he was going to be 35% owned early in the week. Now you're looking at him at like 15, 16% ownership. Maybe that's the gamble worth taking. So a lot of different ways to play it, but I think that's the one I feel most comfortable with, considering most of my players are in the second game anyway. All right. This is a double tight end slate for me in a lot of cases. So I'm curious what your guys' takes are on which tight ends you like the most and where you're at. Sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I'll just go first. I think, especially because we were just talking about Bateman there. I think if Bateman misses, as you stated, I think the direct bump are the tight ends, Andrews and Likely. And if that's the case, I would absolutely be forcing in Andrews and Likely to my lineup. I would want both of them, and I like them both kind of heads up or together anyway.
Yeah.
I think it is a double tight end slate as well. Like the receivers in the 3K range, relative to where the rest of the tight ends. I'm not going to play Kelsey, just putting that straight out. But Frymuth, Schultz, Gray, Likely, Andrews, like I want to try and have two of those guys. I think those guys are more likely to score well versus the $3,800 Austin, the $3,700 Williams, the $3,000 Brown. Like I think it's just those three receivers in the 3K range. Whereas if you need more value or you just want to have guys with similar upside who could possibly beat those receivers, I think the tight ends are where you want to go.
Yeah, I agree with the tight ends being. I really like the double tight end builds today. I think they work out really well, and I also like that if you've got cold weather games, tight ends tend to be favored a little bit more. The Baltimore game, for what it's worth, you've got some wind and it's cold, so tight ends. It feels like a good tight end slate. And Sheets, what are you getting at tight end?
Yeah, I like the. I agree with what Brandon said actually about Andrews and Likely together. Sort of even regardless of whether Bateman is in or out.
Yeah.
I like both of them. And then the other thing though is I think that Fryermuth is like a legit wide receiver too, whatever, but I think he's going to be the second option for Wilson in a negative game script. Or whatever you call it, positive game script. Yeah, it's positive. It's good for you, right? So the game script that Fryermuth needs, I think, is there. And then, like you said, I mean, like all these teams, I think I'm going to be only because I'm just going to run out of slots. I'm not going to get to Chig, I guess, just because there's so many better options. And Kansas City, like you said, I think you play either of those guys, Kelsey and Noah Gray. I think that if you're going to build some wild, double overstack lineups or whatever, I think you could play both of those guys together.
Mm-hmm.
But again, when you start to do that, you start to I don't know. I think you ask for trouble playing KC passing game like the whole season. So I think I like Brand. I think I like the Likely and Andrews, and I don't know which one I like the most between the two of them, but I definitely think those two. I think Fryer was probably the easiest play. Now that I'm literally talking it out, he's not competing with anybody for tight end roles, and he's got the best game script. I mean, he's got the same game script as like some of these others, but I think Fryermuth, I guess, would probably be the best one. No.
Yeah, I think Fryermuth makes on paper the most sense, and also in addition, he's probably he's been the biggest beneficiary without George Pickens of any of the receivers. Mm-hmm. So that's the one that makes the most sense to me. I'm gonna poke back on I know Kelsey's gonna be popular, so this is not like a bold take, but I think Kelsey's a terrific play today. I think this is exactly the kind of game where you see him have a big one, especially again cold weather, lots of dumps down the middle. I also do like the idea of double stacking with Noah Gray. I think that's a totally reasonable route to go. And I don't even think you need to play like Mahomes in that lineup. You know what I'm saying? Like you can play a funky like Lamar with Flowers and maybe Bateman, or just instead using Justice Hill or something, or maybe using Derrick Henry and Bateman or something like that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and kind of playing around with it. So I've got it right now in terms of, and I think Dalton Schultz is he's been disappointing this season, but again, I feel like it is a good tight end game. He's cheap enough. He did have a big game a couple weeks ago, but that was against Jacksonville, so maybe we should take it with a grain of salt. But I've got Kelsey as my highest owned right now, with Andrews second, Andrews and Fryermuth basically the same. Then just behind them, Likely, then Schultz, then Gray. But like I said, I'm playing a lot of those double tight end stacks, and I don't think you necessarily. In Lamar's case, I do think you have to do it with the quarterback. I think if you're going to play Likely and Andrews, I think you should be playing Lamar. But I don't think that in KC's case, if you want to play Gray and Kelsey, that you have to play Mahomes. That would be my take.
Well, I mean, can I ask you another question before we get into back into defense for a second? So there's four quarterbacks on the slate, right?
Yep.
We talked about that Stroud's going to look logical. We talked about playing Mahomes. We talked about Lamar. The only one that I can guarantee you is going to not guarantee you. I'm pretty goddamn sure is going to be passing the ball is Russell Wilson. Should we not be considering playing more of him?
I think people have talked about maybe. I mean, they beat Baltimore last time when he had 7 fantasy points. I think they're going to try as best they can to run the ball 30 times. I don't think, against Baltimore, that's a tough task. But game script wise, you're right. He should be throwing the ball. What is the upside versus the other? It's only 4 quarterbacks. Maybe that's something I'm saying. I was flirting with the idea of just Xing him out, but at no ownership.
I wouldn't do that.
Maybe it's worth taking it. Maybe it is worth it. He's my 4th quarterback right now, but I definitely think that's a strategy that I wouldn't mind using. I just don't personally love him in this matchup. Even though it's a great passing game matchup for teams, like I need to see I don't know. I've seen it against the Cincinnati's. I've seen it. He had the one outlier game against the Jets. I don't know. I guess on this slate with only 4 quarterbacks, it is interesting. Like if this was a Monday slate, you should have just played whoever the lowest owned was because nobody got more than 12 fantasy points. This is a slate where I expect at least Lamar to put up 20 plus. The only time he has in the season was against these Steelers, but I have a feeling it's going to be a little different today. It's a weird slate. All these teams, want to run the ball, and all of these teams, like one of their best assets is their ability to stop the run. So maybe gambling with the Wilson is not such a bad idea.
Hey, Brandon, tell me a little bit more about Bobby too, but only because Brandon brought it up about why you prefer Warren to Harris.
Well, so this is probably biased, but anytime there's been a showdown slate, I've played Warren over Harris, and it has worked out for me this season. Like it's purely biased. So if you look at Warren's game log, I've just happened to play him every time he's either like scored close to 10 points or outscored Harris. That's why I like Warren more.
Well, and the reason
and the discount on ownership.
I have a very straightforward reason.
Yeah.
Harris is the one who is going to pound the ball. He's not going to do much in the pass catching game. Warren is a much better pass catcher than he is, and I am planning on them playing from trailing. And I think he also gets Warren gets a boost from Pickens not playing. I don't think Najee Harris gets a boost really in this kind of matchup.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Wasn't aware of that. I always had this. I'm not even looking at game logs or anything. I just always had the sense that Harris was catching all these balls out of the backfield. I guess not.
Well, he's just on the field a lot, but remember, Warren was out for part of the year. I'm just going to take a look. The last 2 weeks he has 1 target. Najee, okay. He did have a 6-target game before that. And last time against Baltimore, he had, what did he have target wise? He actually had 5 targets in that game, which is pretty high for him. Warren in general is more explosive. He's not going to, Harris is like we all talking to. He's great after getting hit, but he always gets hit in the backfield. So he's like the Mr. 3.5 yards per carry type of play. And this year hasn't been as much the case where Warren's catching like a bunch of balls out of the backfield. But I do see him playing, and he plays the 3rd down possessions, which means that he's probably playing if you're down 2 scores in the 4th quarter. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Also, we always, when we talk about showdown or whatever, even not showdown. When you're analyzing these teams, you look at the wide receiver and then the wide receiver 2, and then you always have to look at the wide receiver 3. Now in showdowns, you have to sometimes go wide receiver 4, but who is what is the receiver tree look like for Pittsburgh? With the exception of Austin and maybe Mike Williams. Okay, you have Freiermuth at tight end, but who's going to be lining up out there?
It's mostly going to be on the 2 wide receiver sets, which they'll run earlier in the game, especially in the close game, whatever. It should be Austin and Jefferson most of the time with Mike Williams.
Yeah, Jefferson. Okay.
Yeah, with Mike Williams more on 3rd down. Jefferson, I expect to get more snaps, but he's not exactly a burst guy. He doesn't, he's a good all around football player. He's a former Ram, so I know him pretty well. But he's gonna catch a couple balls or whatever. He might even be a red zone target in some cases. Mike Williams is sort of the home run threat, but. They look. Time keeps going by. Mike Williams is probably the most talented. But I don't even think probably. Mike Williams is the most talented receiver they have. It's just because he hasn't fit in with what they're doing this season, where they haven't yet to use it. Maybe this is the Mike Williams day. Okay. Now, you know what? The more I think about it, I can sell myself that story at no ownership.
And wasn't there another guy that Pittsburgh gave a couple of good snaps? Some big athletic guy. Now I forget. Is it Washington? Maybe.
Oh, the other tight end, the backup tight end.
Yeah.
Yeah. He gets a couple of things here and there. I just don't. Like I said, I think tight end is pretty strong today, so I don't really.
Absolutely. So he's a tight end. He's not going to like a wide receiver.
Yeah, he's a tight end.
I figured if I can get him at 3K or something like that, wide receiver.
He's 2,600, but he's unfortunately tight end.
Okay.
But like for showdown, absolutely. I would absolutely play Washington in a game like this in showdown. And it wouldn't surprise me, like, who's going to be their leading receiver today? It could be anybody. I don't know.
I'm trying to kind of.
But guessing on a 2-game slate wise, I would rather speculate on an upside play like Mike Williams.
Okay.
That's just me. Or I would just, I would go back to the Kansas City and just say, you know what? Hollywood Brown comes out and has 4 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown.
That's the end of that. I mean.
Right. No, I'm just saying both he and Mike Williams have that type of ability, whereas it's more of a slog and probably a little bit harder to get to for guys like Van Jefferson. Not for Calvin Austin fits that category too, but he's going to be popular.
Who do you like more? I'll put it to you another way. Who do you like more? I'll give you 3 of them: Van Jefferson, Hollywood Brown, or Robert Woods.
Oh man, you gave me 2 Rams in this one. The one that I would be the most overweight would be Hollywood Brown, just in sort of speculative hope, and ownership and everything. Jefferson is probably the most logical for safety.
Not Robert Woods.
It's hard. They've got the. Yeah, I guess you could argue for Robert Woods
because they are missing Mechie, right? I mean,
they are missing Mechie. It could actually, the weird sneaky one for showdown would be like Xavier Hutchinson.
Okay.
But I can't do that on this slate. I guess I would say that I like the upside of Hollywood Brown. I just in speculative. I mean, we've never seen Hollywood Brown this price before. Like, it's kind of weird. And if he's going to have any role whatsoever, even if it's like 20% of the snaps, that means he's probably getting the ball. It's like the old Kadarius Toney when he was actually sort of people thought he was something. He might play 11 snaps, but they're going to have like 4 design plays for him in those 11 snaps at least.
It's going to be. I mean, there's legitimately, besides if you include Hollywood Brown, there's like literally 5 receivers on the field. For Kansas City. Like between both the tight ends,
Watson, Schuster,
Watson, Worthy. Listen, as long as they don't require him to like keep his feet in bounds, he's fine.
But as Brandon mentioned, I'm not ready to give Marquise Brown and say that by the playoffs he'll be the number 1, but it wouldn't be surprising if he was the number 1 receiver by the playoffs. It was a big deal getting him for them. So the fact that he's even playing at all, I think it's the right thing to do to speculate on Brown. And if he gets 0, he gets 0. That's fine. But I'm starting to feel better about he and Mike Williams as contrarian spend downs on a 2-gamer. If it was a big slate, maybe we're not even thinking about this stuff. But 2-gamer, we gotta consider it.
I'm going to put it this way. I would absolutely be floored, if Hollywood Brown scored 0 on the slate. I would be stone cold, shocked. That would be the most surprising thing to happen on the slate if he scored 0. For me.
Yeah, I hear you. And maybe the projections are just off, and this might be a thing where we can manually, so I put a minimum of 22% of him in there, and I probably am going to end up with closer to 30 just because I like this idea. I've sort of sold myself this narrative. I also can sell myself that narrative another week in the system with Mike Williams. So I'm going to do that one as well. Those are going to be I guess 2 of my big differentiators. And by the way, Hopkins and Worthy, these are obviously the chalky plays. I like both of them fine, but I'm just trying to find something to get different. But I think, Hopkins and Worthy, absolutely. I think Hopkins has by the way, it is a revenge thing for Hopkins. And not that matters so much, but I don't know. I throw in a little extra spice in it. But I do like Hopkins. I actually like Hopkins better than Worthy today, which I don't usually. Anyway, but I like this Brown idea. I'm sort of into this. All right, guys, we're going to get out of here because I'm going to have to finish my builds and everything. I'm going to do some hand building. I guess my bold take of the day is that either Hollywood Brown, and I think it's bold enough to say that, either Hollywood Brown or Mike Williams is on the giant winning lineup. Any hot take for you, Sheets?
I Nah,
I think home score 0.
today.
Not today. Brandon, anything? You already sort of mentioned it. You said the Hollywood Brown thing before I did.
Yeah, I mean, I started the show with like I'm playing Brown, like I'm dying on that hill.
Give me all the Brown.
Yeah.
12 game slate. Even for the full week slate, you could still play Brown at 3K. No, I'm just kidding. That might be a little too bold. All right, guys. Good luck to everybody today. I hope you all crush it, and I'll be in the Discord. I'm going to be doing my late swap later on, and if I'm able to, I'm going to jump in and try and do a little late swap show while I'm at it. All right. Good luck to everybody, and